When my mother said my ex deserved someone better, I thought she meant anyone but my sister. Turns out, she meant exactly my sister. I always knew my mother never really approved of me. She never said it outright, of course. That would require the kind of honesty she found distasteful. Instead, her disapproval seeped through in backhanded compliments and subtle sighs, in the way she would light up when talking about my younger sister, Lily, but only offer me tired, obligatory smiles. I had spent my whole life trying to be enough for her, smart enough, pretty enough, accomplished enough, but it never seemed to matter. And yet, somehow, I still wasn't prepared for what she did. I wasn't prepared to walk into my parents' house one evening and see my ex-boyfriend sitting on the couch, his arm slung casually around Lily's shoulders, as if they'd been together forever. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe my mind was playing a cruel trick on me, morphing an old memory into the present. But then Lily looked up at me with a sheepish little smile. And my mother, standing in the kitchen doorway, spoke as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, good, you're here," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "We were just about to sit down for dinner. Join us." I didn't move. My body had locked into place, my pulse hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What the hell is this?" My voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Lily's cheeks flushed, but Daniel, the man I had spent 3 years loving, had the audacity to chuckle under his breath. "I told you she'd be dramatic," he muttered. I snapped my gaze to him. "Are you serious?" My mother sighed, stepping forward like she was about to console a child throwing a tantrum. "Sweetheart, don't make a scene." "A scene?" I let out a hollow laugh, the kind that didn't carry a trace of humor. "You expect me to walk in here, see my ex-boyfriend cuddled up with my sister, and just what? Smile and ask how long this has been going on?" "Well," my mother said primly, "it's been a few weeks. And frankly, I don't see why you should be upset. You and Daniel broke up, didn't you?" My nails dug into my palms. "That's not the point." She tilted her head, a practiced expression of confusion settling onto her face. "Then what is the point, dear?" I could feel the walls closing in, my thoughts spiraling as I struggled to process what was happening. The betrayal of it. The sheer audacity. Lily looked down at her lap, pretending to be innocent. But I wasn't buying it. She had known. She had to have known how much Daniel had meant to me, how hard the breakup had been. But she had gone along with this anyway, cozying up to him like I was nothing. And Daniel, was just sitting there, utterly unfazed. "You," I turned on him, the words catching in my throat. "You were my boyfriend." Daniel shrugged. "Were being the key word." Something inside me cracked. I had spent years loving this man, supporting him, believing we had a future together. We had talked about marriage, about kids, about building a life. And now, here he was, acting as if I had been nothing more than a pit stop on his way to something better. I turned back to my mother, grasping for some explanation that made sense. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She simply smiled. "Because he deserved someone better." The words hit me harder than a slap. I had always known she thought Lily was the superior daughter, the delicate, graceful one, the one who knew how to make people adore her. But hearing her say it outright, hearing her confirm that she had handpicked my replacement, felt like a dagger straight through my chest. For a moment, the room was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner, counting down the seconds of my humiliation. Then, my father walked in, carrying a plate of food, completely oblivious. "Oh, you're here," he said mildly, setting the dish on the table. "We should eat before it gets cold." I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't cry. Not that night, not the next day. But something inside me had shifted. I wanted to believe that this was just a terrible mistake. That Daniel and Lily had simply fallen for each other, and my mother had somehow been caught in the crossfire. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because when I thought back to my relationship with Daniel, I started to see the cracks. The way he had always sought my mother's approval. The way she had always hinted that he could do better. That he deserved someone more suited for him. And the way, towards the end of our relationship, Daniel had seemed distant, not because we were growing apart naturally, but because someone had been whispering in his ear. Someone who wanted him to believe that I wasn't enough. That Lily was the one he should have been with all along. I found myself replaying the last few months of our relationship, trying to pinpoint the moment it had all begun. Had it been during our last family dinner, when my mother had been unusually complimentary toward Daniel while ignoring me completely? Or had it been even earlier, when she had started inviting him over for coffee without me, treating him like he was already part of the family? Had she been planting seeds of doubt in his mind the entire time? And had Lily been waiting for her opportunity? The thought made my stomach turn. But what disturbed me even more was the way they had all acted as if I didn't even matter. As if I had no right to be angry. As if I should have been grateful that Daniel had found someone better. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something with bone-chilling certainty. This wasn't just a case of bad luck. This wasn't just my sister dating my ex. This was something darker. Something orchestrated. And I wasn't going to sit back and let them pretend this was normal. The first time I saw Lily and Daniel together after that disastrous dinner, I nearly walked right past them. Not because I didn't recognize them, but because something in me refused to register the image in front of me as real. It was a Sunday morning, and I had made the mistake of stopping by my parents' house to pick up some things I had left behind. I should have known better, should have expected that they would be there. But some naive part of me still clung to the idea that my family wouldn't actually shove my replacement in my face. And yet, there they were. Lily was perched on the armrest of the couch. Daniel beside her, his arm draped lazily around her waist. They looked comfortable, familiar, as if they had been together forever. My mother sat across from them, positively glowing. "Oh, you just missed brunch," she said, as if nothing was wrong, as if she hadn't set my sister up with my ex like she was matchmaking a pair of lost lovers in a romantic movie. Lily made pancakes. "You really should have been here." I ignored her and turned to my father. "I just came to pick up my books," I muttered, keeping my voice even. "They're in your old room," he said, without looking up from his newspaper. His tone was neutral, but there was a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there before. I nodded and made my way upstairs, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the way Daniel and Lily had gone utterly silent, as if they were waiting for me to react. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I tried to stay away from family gatherings after that, but it wasn't as easy as I thought. My mother called relentlessly, leaving chirpy messages about how it's been so long since we've all been together, and how I should really come over for dinner. She didn't mention Lily and Daniel, but I knew they would be there. Eventually, I stopped answering her calls. That's when Lily started texting. "Lily, hey, I know things are weird right now, but I really hope we can talk soon. Lily, Mom says you've been avoiding her. Please don't let this affect your relationship with the family. Lily, I miss you, you know." I wanted to laugh. She missed me. She had taken my ex, my mother's approval. And now she was trying to guilt-trip me into playing the role of the supportive sister? I didn't respond. Still, the messages kept coming, each one more insistent than the last. Until finally, weeks later, I broke my silence. "Me, what do you want, Lily?" Her response came almost immediately. "Lily, can we just meet? Please? Just once." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a cafe downtown, a place I had picked specifically because it was neutral, far from our family home, far from memories of Daniel. Lily was already there when I arrived, sipping a chai latte and fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. When she saw me, her face lit up. "Oh my God, you actually came." I sat down without responding, folding my arms across my chest. "Say whatever it is you need to say." She hesitated, then let out a soft sigh. "I know this is weird for you." "It's weird for me too." I arched an eyebrow. "Weird," I repeated. "That's the word you're going with?" She flinched, but quickly recovered. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I let out a humorless laugh. "Really? So you just accidentally started dating my ex-boyfriend?" Her lips pressed together, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in her expression, something that almost looked like guilt. She started, but then stopped herself. I leaned forward. "Tell me the truth, Lily. When did it start?" She looked away. "A few weeks after you two broke up," she said, voice small. My stomach twisted. "So Mom set you up immediately?" She flinched again, but didn't deny it. Of course, she didn't. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. "Why are we even having this conversation?" Lily looked up at me then, her eyes wide and earnest. "Because I don't want to lose you." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away before she could touch me. "I mean it," she insisted. "You're my sister. I don't want us to be like this." "Then maybe you shouldn't have taken his side," I said flatly. She shook her head. "It's not about sides." "Yes, it is," I cut her off. "You chose this, Lily. You and Mom both." She swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I let out another laugh, this one colder. No, you just did it anyway. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she whispered, do you still love him? The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to say no, to tell her that Daniel was nothing to me, that I had moved on. But the truth was, it wasn't that simple. I didn't love him anymore, not in the way I used to. But the betrayal still burned. The way he had so easily accepted my mother's words, the way he had agreed that I wasn't good enough for him. That hurt in a way love never had. And maybe that was worse. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. It doesn't matter. Lily's expression was unreadable. I think it does. I studied her for a long moment. And what about you? I asked. Do you love him? For the first time, she hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She had taken him because he had been handed to her. Because my mother had decided he was the better option. But did she actually love him? I wasn't so sure. And neither, it seemed, was she. I pushed back my chair and stood up. Good luck, Lily, I said, grabbing my coat. You're going to need it. Her face twisted. Wait. But I was already walking away. And for the first time since this mess began, I felt like I was the one who was winning. Lily's hesitation that day stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. I had walked away from her, feeling like I'd finally gained some control in this mess. But something about her reaction gnawed at me. If she truly loved Daniel, if she was really as happy as my mother claimed, then why did she look so uncertain? The more I thought about it, the more I started to wonder if Lily had ever actually wanted him in the first place, or if she had just wanted to win. Because when it came to me and Lily, it was never about love. It was about competition. And my mother had always been the referee, deciding who deserved what. I should have let it go. I tried to let it go. But something kept nagging at me. An itch I couldn't quite reach, a feeling that something wasn't right. So, like an idiot, I started digging. And what I found made my stomach turn. The first crack in the picture-perfect story came from a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. I ran into Emily, one of my old co-workers, at a cafe. We exchanged the usual pleasantries. But just as I was about to leave, she hesitated. I heard about everything, she said carefully, stirring her iced coffee. I didn't want to bring it up, but are you okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, I'm fine. She gave me a knowing look. You don't have to lie, you know. I sighed, rubbing my temples. It's complicated. She nodded. I bet. I mean, after everything your mom said about you to Daniel, I don't blame you for cutting them off. I froze. What? Emily blinked. You didn't know? I set my drink down. What did my mom say to Daniel? She bit her lip, clearly debating whether or not to tell me. Emily, I said, my voice firmer now. Tell me. She exhaled sharply. Okay, so, I used to go to the same gym as Daniel, right? I ran into him there a few months ago, back when you guys were still together. Your mom was there with him. I frowned. Wait, my mom was at the gym with him? Emily nodded. Yeah. I thought it was weird too, but I just assumed she was, like, bonding with him or something. Anyway, I overheard them talking. Your mom was saying things like how she was worried about you. How you weren't wife material, how you had no ambition, and how she just knew you weren't the right person for him. The words hit me like a slap. She what? Emily winced. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but they weren't exactly whispering. She told him he deserved someone who would elevate him, someone who had more grace, someone like, and I quote, Lily would be perfect for you. I felt the air leave my lungs. My mother hadn't just encouraged Lily and Daniel after the breakup. She had actively tried to break us up. I clenched my fists, my entire body shaking. Did Daniel say anything? Emily hesitated. Honestly, he didn't even seem surprised. He just nodded and said something like, yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. My stomach twisted into knots. So it had been true. Daniel hadn't just moved on to Lily after our breakup. He had been looking for a way out long before then. And my mother had been more than happy to hand him one. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my relationship with Daniel. Had he ever really loved me? Or had he just been waiting for something better? And had my mother always been whispering in his ear, feeding him doubts? Pushing him towards Lily like some twisted matchmaking puppet master? The worst part was knowing that Lily had known. Maybe she hadn't been involved in the beginning. But she had known what my mother had done, and she had still gone along with it. I wanted to believe it was just manipulation, that she had been pressured. that she had fallen into the same toxic cycle I had grown up with. But deep down, I knew better. Lily had always wanted what I had, and now she had it. I was done playing nice. The next day, I showed up at my parents' house unannounced. My mother opened the door, eyebrows raising in surprise. "Oh, what a lovely surprise. Are you finally coming to your senses?" I pushed past her without answering. Lily was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and frowned. "What are you doing here?" I crossed my arms. "Did you know?" She blinked. "Know what?" "Did you know Mom was feeding Daniel doubts about me before we even broke up?" Her expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. I let out a cold laugh. "Oh my God. You did?" "Of course she didn't." My mother cut in smoothly. "You're being dramatic." I turned on her. "No, I'm not. I ran into Emily. She told me everything." My mother's face darkened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Sweetheart, I was just trying to help. You and Daniel were obviously going nowhere, and I knew he needed someone who could support his ambitions. You weren't ready for that kind of life." My blood boiled. "And what kind of life is that, Mom? Being controlled by you?" She scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous." Lily stood up then, wrapping her arms around herself. "Look, I didn't ask for this, okay?" I shot her a glare. "But you didn't say no, either, did you?" She looked away. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Do you even love him, Lily?" She swallowed hard. She couldn't even finish the sentence. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "You let Mom hand you my boyfriend like a prize. And you didn't even stop to ask yourself if you actually wanted him." Silence. Then my mother huffed, crossing her arms. "Well, it doesn't matter now, does it? They're together. And you're just going to have to accept it." I stared at her, then at Lily. Then I smiled, because I had already seen the cracks forming. I had already won. "Oh, I accept it," I said, turning toward the door. "But don't be surprised when it all falls apart." And as I walked out of that house, I didn't look back. Not even once. I didn't need to do anything. That was the beauty of it. The cracks in Lily and Daniel's relationship had already started to form. And my mother, who had orchestrated the entire thing, was too arrogant to notice that her perfect couple was about to crumble right in front of her. And all I had to do was wait. It happened sooner than I expected. A month after my confrontation with Lily and my mother, I got an unexpected text from my father. "Dad, can we talk?" That alone was surprising. My father had always been passive in family matters, letting my mother dictate the rules. For him to reach out to me directly meant something was wrong. I hesitated for a moment before responding. "Me? About what?" "Dad, your sister." That was enough to get me to agree to meet him. When I arrived at the coffee shop, my dad already looked exhausted. He was nursing a black coffee, his fingers tapping anxiously against the side of the cup. He looked up when he saw me, offering a small, hesitant smile. "Thanks for coming." I slid into the chair across from him. "What's going on?" He exhaled slowly. "It's Lily and Daniel." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. "They're having problems," he admitted. "Your mother won't admit it, but it's obvious. They've been arguing more and more. And, well, Daniel moved out last week." I blinked. "Wait, what?" Dad sighed. "Your mother's trying to cover it up, saying they're just taking space. But I can tell it's bad." He looked down at his coffee. "I think she's scared. She put so much effort into getting them together, and now it's falling apart." I shouldn't have felt satisfaction. I shouldn't have been pleased that everything was collapsing so quickly. But I was. And the worst part? I hadn't even done anything. They had done this to themselves. The next time I saw Lily, she looked different. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something almost fragile. I ran into her at the grocery store, of all places. She was standing in the cereal aisle, staring blankly at a box of granola like it held the answers to all her problems. When she turned and saw me, her entire face fell. I almost walked past her, but then she spoke. "He left," she said softly. I stopped. "Daniel?" She nodded, just packed up his stuff and walked out. No fight, no big argument. Just left. I studied her carefully. She looked genuinely lost. Maybe, for the first time, she was realizing what had actually happened. "What did he say?" I asked. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "He said he was tired of trying to be what Mom wanted." I let out a humorless laugh. "Sounds familiar." Her eyes flicked up to mine, filled with something I couldn't quite place. Regret? Shame? I wasn't sure. She told him I was perfect for him. Lily whispered. She told him I was what he needed. She shook her head. But he never actually chose me, did he? I tilted my head. Do you love him? She opened her mouth, then closed it. We both knew the answer. Lily had never loved Daniel. She had loved winning. She had loved being the favorite, the golden child, the one mom chose. And now that it was all falling apart, she was realizing how empty that victory actually was. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not really. But I did feel something close to pity. You could have had me, I said after a long pause. As your sister, as your family, you didn't have to take everything. Her eyes filled with tears. I know, she whispered. But it was too late for that. The real confrontation came a week later. I got another text from my dad. Dad, come to dinner tonight. Please. I debated ignoring it. But something told me that I needed to go. So I did. When I arrived at my parents' house, the tension was thick enough to choke on. My mother sat at the head of the table, her expression tight. Lily sat beside her, arms crossed, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. My dad looked exhausted. And Daniel? Daniel was nowhere to be seen. I sat down slowly, keeping my face neutral. So, I said, folding my hands on the table. What's this about? My mother let out a sharp breath. I assume you've heard about what happened. I arched an eyebrow. That Daniel finally realized he didn't need to date his ex's sister to prove a point? Yeah. I heard. Lily flinched, but my mother's expression didn't change. I hope you're happy, she said coldly. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. Happy. I repeated. She nodded. You've been bitter about this from the start. And now that things haven't worked out, you're just sitting there, smug. I laughed. Actually laughed. You think I did this? I gestured toward Lily. That I somehow forced her to date my ex? That I manipulated Daniel into leaving? My mother's lips thinned. You never supported them. I scoffed. Are you hearing yourself? She ignored me. Turning to Lily. You can fix this, she said firmly. You just need to remind him of why he chose you in the first place. Lily's face twisted. I didn't choose him, Mom. You did. For the first time, my mother faltered. Lily let out a slow breath. I should have never let you push me into this, she said, her voice shaking. I don't even know if I ever wanted Daniel. She swallowed. I just wanted you to love me as much as you love control. A heavy silence fell over the table. My mother's face turned to stone. This is your fault, she spat at me. I smiled. No, Mom. This is yours. I stood up. I don't have to be here, I said, looking around the table. And I don't have to prove anything to you anymore. Lily didn't stop me. My dad looked at me with something like regret in his eyes. And my mother? She just sat there, stiff and furious, realizing, for the first time, that she had lost. A few months later, I heard that Daniel had moved to another city. Lily and I didn't speak often, but she sent me a single text. Lily, you were right. It was never about him. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say, because I had already won. And this time, I had done it without playing my mother's game. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking Reddit cheating stories happening around you.